Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to today's press briefing at Amsterdam. My name is Marie-Agnes Heine. I'm the head of the Communication Department at the European Medicines Agency, and I will moderate today's briefing. As usual, we will first update you on the recent developments regarding COVID-19 vaccines and treatments, and will then open up the floor for questions. I'm joined today by two colleagues. One, Dr. Marco Cavalieri, the head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy and chair of the EMA Pandemic Task Force, is connected remotely. And here with me in the room is Dr. Georgi Genov, the head of Pharmacovigilance. As always, the briefing is broadcast via YouTube and Europe by satellite. The footage can be used free of charge by all media, and you will find the respective link in the invite to this briefing. I'm now giving the floor to EMA's Head of Biological Health Threats and Vaccine Strategy, Dr. Cavalieri, who will provide you with a short update. Dr. Cavalieri, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's COVID-19 press briefing. It has been a while since our last press briefing, and it is my pleasure to give you an update on the latest developments. Across the EU, the situation has stabilized. However, infections are still in the millions worldwide. This pandemic is far from over. COVID-19 will continue to impact our lives. We must remain vigilant and should be prepared for the appearance of new variants and for a possible surge of COVID-19 cases in the coming winter. At the moment, there is a need to monitor carefully the spread of the BA4 and BA5 Omicron subvariants in South Africa and in other regions, to understand whether it would lead to an increase in cases also in the European Union. Last week, the European Commission urged member states to use the summer months to step up their planning and shift from emergency management to a sustainable maintenance of the pandemic. Vaccines for Europeans, but also for people worldwide, are a central pillar of our response to the pandemic. Nearly 500,000 lives among people 16 years of age and older have been saved in Europe thanks to vaccination. At the EMA, we are working closely with vaccine manufacturers to guide and direct their efforts into developing adaptive vaccines that tackle current and emerging variants of the virus and offer increased and longer-term protection. When we talk about adaptive vaccines, we mean tweaking the 5 authorized COVID-19 vaccines so they match more closely Omicron and other variants that have been emerged recently. Adaptive vaccine could also include more than one virus strain. Developers are currently actively investigating whether bivalent vaccines offer advantages to monovalent vaccines, and we expect to see results from ongoing clinical trials in the next couple of months. This vaccine could be administered to unvaccinated people and to people who have already been vaccinated with a primary series or a primary series and boosters. At the EU level, we are working very closely with the European Commission, so ERA, which is the new Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority, and the ECDC. Globally, any decision on adapting vaccines will be taken in partnership with the World Health Organization and with the International Coalition of Medicine Regulatory Authorities, which is called the ICMRA. Aligning our approaches with health authorities and vaccines manufacturers at a global level will be paramount to address the health needs of people around the world and to ensure a wider acceptance of vaccines. It will also facilitate manufacturing and supply of vaccines across the globe. International regulators have agreed that clinical trials for the adaptive vaccine should be designed to demonstrate superiority to the current ones in terms of quantity of neutralizing antibodies against Omicron, but also in maintaining neutralization against other variants of concern that have been in circulation recently. At the EU level, the decision-making for authorizing adaptive vaccine will follow established procedures. So the EMA will issue scientific opinions recommending the approval of adaptive vaccines if the data submitted by the manufacturer confirm the safety and the immune response of these vaccines in the defined population. Our priority is to ensure that adaptive vaccines are possibly approved by September at the latest, to be ready for the rollout of new immunization campaigns in the EU in the autumn. This would allow manufacturers to adjust their production lines accordingly. The vaccines currently available in the market are all excellent options. However, innovation never stops, and we are working with researchers and vaccine manufacturers towards the development of second-generation vaccines. The aim is to support the development of vaccines that offer broader and longer protection. Some of these vaccines are built to achieve variant-proof protection, while others aim at being protective against a broad range of coronaviruses besides SARS-CoV-2. In addition, some developers are looking at vaccines able to prevent infection and transmission. Others are also working on combined vaccines against COVID-19 and seasonal influenza. However, these developments take time. It is unlikely that highly innovative vaccines concepts are ready for a regulatory assessment by the EMA before next year. A number of new vaccines are currently under review. The CHMP started a rolling review of COVID-19 vaccine HIPRA in March. This protein-based booster vaccine is meant for adults who have already been fully vaccinated with a different COVID-19 vaccine. Preliminary results suggest that the immune response with COVID-19 vaccine HIPRA might be effective against SARS-CoV-2 and variants of concern such as Omicron. COVID-19 Valneva vaccine is also still under rolling review. The rolling review will continue until sufficient evidence is available from the company to submit a formal market authorization application. These vaccines have been developed according to the principle of immunobridging, which means that protection is inferred by achieving a substantial level of antibodies able to neutralize SARS-CoV-2 similarly or better than the already approved vaccines. I will provide you now with updates on other recent developments at EMA. Since our last press briefing in March, we have issued a joint advice with the ECDC on a possible fourth dose or a second booster of one of the messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccines. Overall, it is too early to consider using a fourth dose of messenger RNA COVID-19 vaccine in the general population. However, people over 80 years of age could benefit from a second booster, given the higher risk of severe COVID-19 in this age group, in which immune responses can be lower than in younger individuals. We also started evaluating an application for a booster dose for people over 18 for AstraZeneca's Vaxzevria. While for community, we have added the possibility to use this vaccine as a heterologous booster in people who have received a different vaccine during primary vaccination to its label. Moving on from boosters, we have just started the evaluation of an application from Moderna to extend the use of Spikevax to children from 6 months of age to 5 years, and this is the first application for this young age group. For Nuvaxovid, we are in the process of assessing data to give a recommendation on its use in young people from 12 to 17 years of age. We were able to add also a new monoclonal antibody cocktail to the range of treatments available. Evusheld, which is developed by AstraZeneca, received a positive opinion by the CHMP for the prevention of COVID-19 in adults and adolescents from 12 years of age. This recommendation is based on data from a study in over 5,000 people showing that Evusheld reduced the risk of COVID-19 infection by 77%, with the duration of protection from the virus estimated to be at least 6 months. Finally, I would like to update you on Lagevrio, which is molnupiravir. The evaluation of the application for this antiviral agent is currently ongoing, and the CHMP has requested additional clinical data to the developer. Let me conclude the briefing by emphasizing that the number one priority must still be to close vaccination gaps. Only 50% of Europeans are fully vaccinated and boosted. 15% of EU citizens over 18 have not yet received a single shot of vaccine. It is important that people who are not yet vaccinated, who have not yet had a booster, get their shot, especially if they are at a higher risk of getting severe disease. I will stop here and give the floor back to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cavalieri. And dear colleagues from the media, you now have the chance to ask questions, so please turn on your camera. And as usual, please click on the icon at the bottom of the WebEx window to raise your hand. And when I give you the floor, we will unmute your microphone and you can then ask your question. So today, the first question comes from Helen Collis from Politico. Helen, please.
Thank you very much. Marco Cavalieri, you said that in September, that would be the latest date for a first possible approval for an adaptive vaccine. Can you tell us which vaccine or vaccines this is most likely to be, and what tweaks do they comprise? So which variants, for example, will they be targeting? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Marco, that's for you, the question on the variants and the date.
Yeah, indeed, we are working with all the developers and the manufacturer of the vaccines that are currently approved, but it's no mystery that the messenger RNA vaccines are quite advanced in the race and are the ones that have more chances of delivering vaccines in that time frame. So that's why we're working primarily with Moderna and Pfizer-BioNTech to see if we can achieve adaptive vaccine for their own vaccines as said, by the end of September, which is not precluding the possibility of coming to an opinion earlier than that. But of course, it's still very much unpredictable as you know, clinical trials are currently ongoing. And with respect to the composition, as you know, both developers have started clinical trials of using adaptive vaccine, either going with a monovalent Omicron vaccine or a bivalent Omicron N1. And this is the primary target for these two developers.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Lorenzo Vendemiale from RAI. Lorenzo, please.
Hi everybody. If you have to make a guess, how many chances in percentage do we have to have an updated vaccine for September available? And most of all, I would like to know if you can tell us how does it work, because since we buy a lot of vaccines, like hundreds of millions of doses of the old one, how does it work if we have another vaccine available? The companies will just replace the old one with the new one, or we have to buy it again with a new contract?
Thank you very much. Only to clarify the first part, for your first question, you said percentage of updated vaccines. Do you mean how many or at what time?
No, how many percentage we have to have it available for September?
Okay, I think this question is for Marco. The second question regarding the purchase, it's a question for the European Commission, and we would like to ask you to turn to them to get a response to that question. But now over to Marco.
Yeah, on your first point, of course, and we cannot really predict whether this vaccine will be successful in the clinical trials. But what we've seen also recently with another construct that has been investigated by Moderna, so it's a bivalent beta and one strain, it looked like it would be possible for this construct to achieve superiority, at least as first booster in the setting of neutralizing Omicron, which means that I still think there are good chances that if this study will be completed as forecasted, then we could be in the position of seeing good results that could lead to the approval of adaptive vaccines. So the chances of having these adaptive vaccines available in the autumn seems to be pretty high.
Thank you very much. The next question comes from Victoria English from Mednu. Victoria, please.
Okay, I have two questions. One is a repeat of something that we discussed a couple of months ago. This is the question about T-cell immunity, whether there's been any progress in understanding this in the current vaccine, any of the current vaccines. The second question concerns the concept of herd immunity. Is it possible to say whether any geographic area has in fact achieved this?
The second question, at least, Victoria, is also a bit out of our remit, but I don't know whether Marco can perhaps say a few words on this. The first one on the T-cell immunity, Marco, please.
Yeah, so we are working with the scientific community and other bodies like the WHO in order to have a good understanding of what is the real impact of T-cell immunity in the protection. But it's clear that protection from severe disease, particularly in the longer term and particularly in the face of new variants that have been emerging, seems to be quite important. We have seen that the epitopes that are related to cell-mediated immunity are very much conserved across strains, and this type of immunity is more longer lasting. So definitely cellular-mediated immunity is contributing to the protection, particularly against severe disease and particularly in the longer terms. But unfortunately, there are no studies that have been able really to quantify or to define exactly the type and the amount of protection that will be derived from T-cell immunity. With respect to your second point, indeed, this is a bit outside of our remit, but just to say that with the virus continuously changing and with the inability, even after infection, with even some of the earlier subvariants of Omicron that have been spreading to prevent reinfection, is very challenging to even think about achieving herd immunity at this stage. And I think we should not really be looking into that.
Thank you very much. We now have a question in the chat from Sylvie Bournouf, APM. So when can we expect to have a decision for Sanofi GSK vaccine with Prefteen? So this would also be for you, Marco, please.
Yes, at the moment we are evaluating their dossier, and they submitted also the clinical efficacy data from their pivotal trial. They also are developing booster shots of also adaptive vaccines, and we will be looking at the entirety of this data to see by when we could be in the position of coming up with an opinion. But I would not expect that this can happen before, let's say, July this year at the earliest.
Thank you very much. We now have a question from Hungary. Katalin Halmai, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. At the height of the pandemic, there was much talk about the Russian Sputnik vaccine. Is the Sputnik vaccine authorization process still ongoing, and has anything changed with Russia's war against Ukraine in this respect? Is there still a need for the authorization? Thanks.
Thank you very much. I hand over this question to Marco Cavalieri as well.
Yeah, so nothing has changed with respect to the process for Sputnik, even if, as already stated in the last press briefing, there has not been really tangible progresses with respect to submission of data in this regard. But in actual fact, there has not been any official change to the status of this vaccine at this point in time.
Thank you very much. We still have a follow-up question from Helen Collis. Helen, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you give us any idea of where we stand with next generation vaccines for COVID-19, vaccines that would have longer durability, last longer and provide broader protection?
Thank you. Dr. Cavalieri, can you expand on the second generation vaccines, please?
Indeed, it's a very important area because we need to work into thinking what should come next and how we can make the vaccines that we have even better. And indeed, having longer term protection will be one of the main goals. As I mentioned, there are different platform technology under consideration, different constructs that build on the one that we have, but also that are going beyond, that are trying to advance in this sense. The point that the majority of all these efforts are still in the early phases of development. So the majority are still in the preclinical phase, with only few ones that have entered into phase 1 studies, clinical trials, which means that it will take a bit longer before we can really understand what could be the time frame for a potential regulatory application. Nevertheless, we are following this very closely, and we are really open to engage with developers and to see how we can help them to advance all these new technologies.
Thank you very much. We now have another question from Italy. Elena Dusi from La Repubblica, please. Elena?
You are considering, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I only wanted to double check.
are you considering the approval of the AstraZeneca vaccine as a booster because you consider superior in a way the heterologous vaccination compared to the homologous one? And if so, are you going maybe to advise AstraZeneca as a booster? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another question for you, Marco, please.
Yeah, as said, we have an application ongoing for a booster of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we are evaluating that in the context of homologous or heterologous booster. And if the data will be sufficient to show that there is a good immune response after the booster and the safety profile is acceptable, then we will be in the position of potentially authorizing also Vaxzevria as a booster shot. At this point in time, as the review is ongoing, I cannot tell you much more than this, but definitely I see this as a possibility.
Thank you very much. I now see no more questions. It's your last chance. Otherwise, thank you very much for your interest. Oh, Helen, you have another question. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just looking for an update on the molnupiravir assessment. Are we going to get a decision this summer?
Marco, perhaps you can also respond to the question on molnupiravir.
Yeah, as mentioned, the CHMP decided that there is a need of waiting for more clinical data. So we need to have more data from clinical trials that would show that indeed there is a clear benefit on the use of molnupiravir in the treatment of COVID-19 in the outpatient setting. And as you know, one of the largest studies ongoing right now with molnupiravir is the panoramic study, which is a platform study in the United Kingdom that is investigating molnupiravir as the first antivirals that enter into this clinical trial. So we are very much interested to look at the evidence from this study in particular to see if it would show that indeed the molnupiravir is effective in this type of use.
Thank you very much. And with this information, we are closing today's press briefing. Thank you very much for your questions and for your interest in our work. And also a big thank you to my colleagues who participated today. So if you have any further questions or feedback, please do not hesitate to follow up with the press office at press@ema.europa.eu. Thanks again and goodbye for today.